Alright guys, I hope you're well. In today's video, I want this video to be the one-stop shop for the character of Macbeth. Over the next 10 minutes, I want you guys to get a pen, a paper and make notes, because I am going to try to tell you everything that you need to know about the character of Macbeth. So if we look at the play and if we look at the questions that came up over the last 2 years, in year 1 of the new exam, the question came up about Lady Macbeth. In year 2, it was about Macbeth and Banquo and their relationship with the supernatural. For year 3, which is your year, I genuinely think that you will get a question about Macbeth, the man himself. Now let's talk about Macbeth. What happens to him, what kind of themes, and everything we can talk about when it comes to Macbeth. So first, let's do a quick overview of Macbeth in the play. So Macbeth, he begins the play. The first thing we hear about Macbeth is that he was unseaming the enemy from the nave to the chaps. That's Act 1, Scene 2, guys. And that means that he was chopping the enemy from the chin to the belly button. What that basically means is, our first impression of Macbeth is that he is someone you don't mess with. He's a brave, he's a powerful soldier. He's perfect. Yeah, he fights for the king, he's courageous. Now, that's the first impression that Shakespeare builds about Macbeth. Then we move on to Act 1, Scene 3. And this seemingly powerful man begins to show very quick signs of weakness when he's almost obsessed by the witches from the very instant. And the quote you can use is, "Stay, you imperfect speakers." Yeah, Macbeth is almost begging the witches to stay. Stay for what? So he can learn more about the prophecies. Now, very quickly, guys, you can make the point. From Act 1, Scene 2 to Act 1, Scene 3, Macbeth goes from being courageous, brave, a man that nobody messes with, to a man who's almost eating out of the hands of the witches. This is over 2 scenes. Towards the end of this scene, Act 1, Scene 3, Macbeth shows signs that there's something dodgy about his character. Yeah, there's something not right. Not everything is as clear as it seems. Because he says things that shows that he wants power. And this is where the first theme about Macbeth comes in. This is the theme of ambition. He talks about how he wants to surpass the current thing and almost become king. And he talks about what these prophecies may mean for him. So this is the first theme, and this is the theme of ambition. Now this theme is further emphasized in Act 1, Scene 5, when Macbeth writes a letter to Lady Macbeth. And Macbeth says to her that I have learned from the perfectest report that they have more in them than mortal knowledge. Who is he talking about? Macbeth is speaking about the witches. So Macbeth, being a bit of a gossip, he's been going around and he's been asking people about the witches. Can I trust them? Are they reliable? And he says that I have learned from the perfect report. So he's saying that I've learned from a very trustworthy source, a very honest person, that the witches have more in them than mortal knowledge. They know more than you and me. Now this is 2 particular themes that come into play. The theme of ambition and the theme of power. Now let's look at this in 2 ways. First, ambition. The fact that he's going around asking about the witches shows that he's ambitious for the prophecies to come true. But twofold now. This also shows that Macbeth is powerful and at the same time powerless. He's powerful because I would argue that at this point in the play, Macbeth shows us that he is almost pulling the strings of his wife. Yeah, people argue that Lady Macbeth controls Macbeth. I would flip that and say, Macbeth controls Lady Macbeth. He's the one that writes the letter to her. He's the one that tells her about the prophecies. He's the one that calls her my partner of greatness. Yeah, he's the one that pulls her strings. He is the muscle, she is the brains, and he knows that. But number 2, it shows he's powerless because who has more mortal knowledge than him? He understands and he admits that the witches have more knowledge and therefore the witches are more powerful than he himself and his wife. So guys, track it so far. Look how quick things are changing. Within the first act, Macbeth goes from being courageous to showing cracks very quickly. That's your point about structure. Act 2. This is where Macbeth begins to be tortured and he begins to be torn. And this is with the theme of guilt. and regret comes into the play. Now, believe it or not, my prediction for this year is that you will get a question to do with guilt and regret. I say guilt and regret because first things first, guys, this is the famous dagger scene in Act 2, where Macbeth talks about how he sees a dagger before him and the handle is awkwardly clutching his hand and so on. Basically saying that Macbeth is almost wanting to kill the king. The dagger is almost seducing him. It's making him do what he wants to do. But what's also important is Macbeth's further weakness is shown in this act. He begins off by saying to Lady Macbeth, listen babes, we are not going to be killing Duncan tonight. It's not going to happen. And by the end of the scene, Lady Macbeth has persuaded him that they will indeed be killing Duncan. Now, how does she do this? She calls him a coward. She threatens, she challenges his masculinity. Macbeth is a man known for simply that. He is known for being a man, and therefore when somebody challenges his masculinity, it hits him where it hurts. And to prove his masculinity, what does he do? He says, I will kill Duncan. Now this is your context. Patriarchal society, men were known for their dominance. Therefore, for Lady Macbeth to question her husband's dominance, she almost forces him to kill Duncan to prove that he is indeed a man. This is where you could almost also argue that Lady Macbeth is pulling his strings. Yeah, because at this point, she is the one that knows exactly what to say to make Macbeth do exactly what she wants. It's a bit of a power struggle. So in this act, they kill Duncan, they frame the guards, and that's done with. In Act 3 now, Macbeth becomes king. Now this is very important. Macbeth goes from being brave and courageous to killing the king to feeling guilty when he says Macbeth does murder sleep. But now in Act 3, Macbeth is at the height of his evilness. In Act 3, Macbeth becomes king. But more importantly, Macbeth, in this act, he hires some hitmen to kill Banquo and Fleance. Fleance escapes, Fleance escapes and Banquo is killed. There's a few important things to note here. Number one, he acts off his own back. At no point does he consult Lady Macbeth. In Act 3, you will notice that Macbeth almost leaves Lady Macbeth to one side. Yeah, he puts her to one side. He doesn't ask her advice, he doesn't really consult her, he does what he wants. But number two, look at the trajectory of Macbeth, the downward spiral. He goes from killing the enemy, fantastic, then he lowers himself by killing Duncan, now he lowers himself by killing Banquo, and he even tries to kill Fleance. Yeah, he's getting lower and lower. It's as though as the play is developing, Macbeth's morality is being stripped away. This idea of what is right and what is wrong no longer exists. So Macbeth becomes the king. Macbeth gets Banquo killed, Fleance survives, and then Macbeth at the banquet, he begins to see the ghost of Banquo. Now many critics and many writers and many teachers and many students have said that the fact that Macbeth sees the ghost of Banquo, it shows that he's guilty. But I don't agree with that. I do not agree with that. I think that the only reason Macbeth sees the ghost of Banquo is because Fleance survives. He's not guilty that Banquo's dead. He doesn't feel guilty. He is absolutely paranoid that Fleance is now going to become king. So it is his obsession that forces him to see the ghost of Banquo, not his guilt. He doesn't feel bad that Banquo's dead. He feels bad that Fleance survived. So for this point, I will be very careful in how I argue it. I wouldn't argue his guilt. I would argue his pure obsession. For what? He's ambitious to hold the power. And this is where the theme of ambition comes into it again. Now let's move on to Act 4. The theme of ambition carries on going. The theme of power and powerless carries on going. He goes to see the witches. And they tell him the prophecies that no man born of a woman can harm you, and until Birnam Wood comes to Dunsinane, and beware of the Thane of Fife, beware of Macduff. Now those are all the prophecies. But two things. At this point, guys, Macbeth is the king. For the king to go and see the witches, that's just blasphemous. Yeah, that's the crime against religion. But yet Macbeth does this. It shows you how weak of a king he is. He needs the witches to maintain his mental state. He needs the witches to maintain his power. But number two, it shows his ambition. He will go out all lengths. And this is when he plans to murder Macduff's family. And this is the scene, the act where he kills Macduff's family. He kills Macduff's wife and child. And Macduff is in England. Again, look at the trajectory. He goes from fighting for the king, then he kills Duncan, then he kills Banquo, then he kills Lady Macduff, then he kills Macduff's son. There's no barrier anymore. It's open season. And you want to emphasize again that Macbeth does this on his own will. He's not asking Lady Macbeth. She doesn't even talk anymore. Yeah, so it's that question. Did he use her? And once he's finished with her, see you later, mate, I'm going to go do my own thing. Guys, finally, we come to Act 5. There's one important thing in Act 5 that I want you guys to focus on. There's two events. Lady Macbeth dies, but let's park that to one side as to how she dies. But let's look at Act 5, Scene 5, as to what Macbeth does when he finds that she's dead. I would argue very strangely that at this point in the play, Macbeth shows, I almost feel sorry for him. He shows signs of remorse and guilt. He talks about how life is a brief candle and life is a story told by a fool that signifies nothing. And he says all of this after he hears that Lady Macbeth is dead. And I would argue at this point in the play, all these quotes show that Macbeth is almost thinking, what have I done? I've become king, I've ruled my life, for what? Signifies nothing, it doesn't mean anything. Just as she died, I will one day die too. And that foreshadows his death. But at the same time, it shows regret. But I genuinely feel that Macbeth is so far into it now that he believes he can't turn back. The armies are closing in. The enemy is on the periphery of the castle. Malcolm is there, Macduff is there. They're about to attack. He has no choice but to carry on moving forward. He has no choice but to carry on fighting. But I would argue that these quotes show that Macbeth comes full circle. He starts off the play feeling guilt for what he's done. Then he has no guilt. But then, I would argue, just before he dies, he has the guilt again. He comes full circle. And then Macbeth is killed in battle with Macduff. So the three themes that I want you to focus on when it comes to Macbeth is ambition, power or powerlessness, and the idea of guilt/regret. Those are your three main themes. Now, I've just talked you through the key events surrounding Macbeth. If you're revising, what I would do is go and look at these key quotes that I mentioned or paraphrased. Because I genuinely think, guys, that you will get a question on the character of Macbeth this year. Macbeth, in my opinion, is one of Shakespeare's best characters. He has everything inside him. He has what I and you have. He has all those ideas of ambition, power, but the difference between us and him is that maybe we control it, yet he can't. It gets the better of himself. Look, I will say, what's the difference between Banquo and Macbeth? It's the fact that Macbeth has Lady Macbeth, Banquo doesn't have a Lady Banquo to talk and plan. Alright guys, that's just a quick, well it's not quick, that's quite a thorough discussion around the character of Macbeth. If you have any questions further about Macbeth, please do let me know, because I genuinely think that you guys will get Macbeth himself this year as a question. Try to answer practice questions around Macbeth and guilt and regret. I don't think you will get ambition, because Lady Macbeth came up in the first and her question was around ambition. So I doubt they're going to repeat that same question. But as always, if you have any questions, drop them down below. Drop me a DM on Instagram. If you like the video, please give it a like. If you haven't, please do subscribe. As always, thank you for watching. It has been Mr. Eveything English.